were very involved in the marriage, and they were definitely involved in the divorce. It was really felt like it was their divorce.
Whether or not Donna may have admitted to her son, Robert, about certain things.
His parents just couldn't accept him being someone who wasn't Jewish, and that he'd have to break up with me, that they literally said it's either her or them.
They're not allowed to get it from him because it's opinion testimony that he believes his mother is guilty, that his mom is guilty.
They kept saying that it doesn't involve them, and that Wendy felt that I was only interested in who would have done this, which seems like a normal reaction when someone you know well is gunned down in their home. I think not being interested in a murder of someone you know well is unusual.
So we're not going to be covering celebrity news today. We have been covering Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively over the past couple streams, but today we're going to get back onto our normal schedule, covering all the cases that we've been covering up so far. So today we're going to be covering Donna Adelson, but we got Koberger coming up. We have more Karen Reed stuff, Corey Richens, the crazy author person, and maybe Alexi Treviso. You know, I keep checking their website and we see some updates here and there. A lot of the stuff we don't have access to. But yeah, we're back to our normal schedule. Of course, you know, if any of this Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni stuff comes out, we're going to continue covering that, and same thing with Mangione as well. But for Donna Adelson, as you guys remember, she had her trial set for, I think it was like middle of September. It was like right before Sarah Boone. So I think it was like middle of September. Yes, I think September 16. All right, so just a little bit of recap. I mean, I've already essentially recapped everything that's happened so far. So we finally have a trial date for Donna Adelson sometime in the summer. I think they're going to do jury selection. That's going to take a couple of days. And then her trial is going to commence somewhere in June season. But like I mentioned before, she had her trial date set for September. And then abruptly they were like, well, you know, we have some issues with Donna Adelson's representation. And essentially Daniel Rashbaum was forced to withdraw. And then the second attorney, I think his name is Alex Morris. Mr. Morris was going to continue on representing Donna Adelson. However, I think he was asked to withdraw as well because potentially there could have been information that he may have learned from Daniel Rashbaum that could have been attorney-client privilege with Charlie Adelson. It was just like a whole fucking mess. We'll do the transcript to see what it is that Donna Adelson and her team, her formal team, was worried about with having Robert Adelson, her estranged son, testify at her trial. And then we'll listen to the podcast and see what Rob has said about his family before. Like I mentioned before, we listened to parts of it with you guys, but I don't think I've listened to like a bunch of different episodes where Rob was in each and every one. So I think it'll be really interesting. We get to hear from Robert Adelson and his wife, Aretha. And, you know, there was a little bit of some family drama between the couple and Donna Adelson and the other Adelson family members. I think it was mostly just with Donna Adelson, though. Donna, not surprised. Like I was mentioning before, the trial with Donna Adelson came to a halt. They weren't even able to get into jury selection because of Charlie Adelson exercising his Sixth Amendment right. And he did not want his former defense attorney defending his mother, who he's already been defending his mother for I think 9 months at this point. I think he was assigned in January. The trial was supposed to happen in September, but he was afraid because he was subpoenaed to testify at the trial. And then who will be cross-examining him? Well, possibly his former attorney or the other attorney. All right, so this is from, I think this was filed maybe a day or the same day as the trial that was supposed to happen. We got a date somewhere around here. Mr. Adelson was previously charged in Leon County with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. The case proceeded to trial, and Mr. Adelson was convicted as charged. At trial, Mr. Adelson was represented by Daniel Rashbaum. Mr. Adelson's judgment is not final. His case is currently pending on direct appeal. I think it's still pending. The document listed additional prosecution witnesses, one of whom was Mr. Adelson. The trial of Mrs. Adelson's case is scheduled to begin the week of September 16, 2024. Mr. Rashbaum is one of the defense attorneys. And I was wondering, why would Donna Adelson hire the same defense attorney as the one who represented her son? And obviously the son lost, right? He was convicted. Wouldn't you want someone else with a different perspective? I don't know. Maybe she just wanted someone just that she was comfortable with, someone that knew the ins and out about the case. But I mean, I don't know why she would hire him again. The United States Constitution and all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to have assistance of counsel for his defense. The essence of the Sixth Amendment right is the privacy of communication with counsel. So the attorney-client privilege, again, Charlie Adelson is afraid that there might be some, attorney-client privilege that Daniel Rashbaum knows about. And even though Daniel Rashbaum is an attorney, right? I'm sure he's a seasoned attorney. I'm sure he knows better. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It'd be really hard to construct this wall to ensure that any communication that you had with Charlie Adelson is not going to be used for Donna Adelson's benefit, and possibly at the deterrence, or at the not deterrence, what's the word I'm looking for? At the not benefit, I guess, of Charlie Adelson. Sorry, that was not a really smooth way of saying it. The Florida bar, entitled Conflict of Interest, former client, states the following: a lawyer who has formerly represented a client in a matter must not afterwards, I'm just going to focus on B right here, use information relating to the representation to the disadvantage of the former client. So they're afraid that Daniel Rashbaum, in assisting and in representing Donna Adelson, that it's possible that it could somehow disadvantage Charlie Adelson in some way. And it's probably because Daniel Rashbaum has a lot of information that he knows. Mr. Rashbaum previously represented Mr. Adelson. Yep, check, we know that. Rashbaum currently represents Mrs. Adelson. Check, yep. The state has subpoenaed Mr. Adelson as a witness for Donna Adelson's trial, signaling its intent to call Adelson, Mr. Adelson, as a witness during the trial. Yep, check. 4, if Mr. Adelson is called as a witness by the state during Mrs. Adelson's trial, Mr. Adelson would be subject to cross-examination by his former attorney, Mr. Rashbaum. Yeah, that'd be really weird. Mr. Adelson is invoking his Sixth Amendment right as to Mr. Rashbaum, his former counsel, and Mr. Adelson specifically asserts that he does not waive the conflict of interest regarding his attorney-client communication with Mr. Rashbaum. Number 9, further, there is a finding that by court, Mrs. Adelson's defense team constructed an ethical wall. Unless there is a finding by the court that Mrs. Adelson's defense team constructed an ethical wall with regard to Mr. Rashbaum's knowledge and information gleaned from his prior representation of Mr. Adelson would assert that his privilege and conflict of interest applies to the entire defense team in Mrs. Adelson's case. So, like I said, initially, Daniel Rashbaum had to withdraw. And I think Mr. Morris, the other attorney that was working with Mr. Rashbaum, hired by Donna, was planning on staying on Donna's case. However, he had to withdraw as well. So Donna Adelson has like a completely whole new defense team representing her right now. Mr. Adelson should not be subject to cross-examination by any members of the defense team who has been tainted by Mr. Rashbaum's knowledge and information. So that is what happened in middle September. Donna was very upset. I think she was crying in the courtroom, and she just was not able to have Daniel Rashbaum represent her anymore. And also, she had initially, I think, pushed her trial to an earlier date because she was hoping to be home for the Jewish holidays. Yeah, she really thought she was going to be home by then. Or maybe in Vietnam. Who knows? Who knows where she was going to be? Now, so let's talk about the unsealed hearing. The transcripts are out from that. And this actually happened on September 6th. So about 10 days, right? 16? Yeah. So about like 10 days before Donna Adelson's trial was supposed to happen. They had this under seal. We didn't have access to it. However, because the defense team, I believe the defense team wanted to have this unsealed for the limited purpose of authorizing current defense counsel to have the hearing transcribed. So that is why I guess we have access to it now. And it's like, yay, all right, more information. I try to access other documents that they reference in this transcript, but it's still sealed. So the state filed something in motion in limine. I was unable to get that. And maybe there is a defense response to it. That is, I can't open the document. So we don't have access to that. I know. People are saying there's no way we needed to know. Yeah, I believe that as well. I believe that. There was just too many suspicious things in her statement when she's being interrogated. Huge mistake for them to let Wendy be interrogated. They thought Wendy was going to, I don't know, maybe be the, poor, grieving ex-wife. What is she going to do now? But Wendy just kept talking. And I think like being under immense pressure. And also I think Wendy is possibly maybe a people pleaser as well. I think she started dropping the ball real quick, started saying like, oh, maybe it was Charlie. Charlie made jokes about this. Charlie made jokes about that. Oh, my family hates him. I think Wendy is a talker when she is nervous and very detrimental for her, in my opinion. But I don't know if the state has enough evidence against her. I think they just definitely want to focus on the main people. So like Donna Adelson, Charlie Adelson, and then Catherine McBanwell, and then the 2 hitmen. So I don't know. Wendy, we'll see. We'll see what happens to Wendy. Okay, sealed in-camera motion hearing. So again, we didn't get to see it. September 6th, Leon County Courthouse, Tallahassee, Florida. Representing the state, we have Georgia Kappelman and we have Sarah Dugan. And just a reminder, if you guys don't remember who everyone looks like, I think I have it up here. Okay, we have assistant state prosecutors. We have Georgia Kappelman, who again did a very excellent job at cross-examining Charlie Adelson at his trial. Charlie Adelson was so smug. He thought that he was doing so well on the stand, you know? And I think even in the jailhouse calls when he was talking to his mother, Donna Adelson, he was like, yeah, you know, like Daniel Rashbaum told me I was doing pretty well on the stand. I did pretty good. You know, I got a good feeling about this. And then boom, convicted. We also have Sarah Dugan as well, who is also the assistant state attorney. Daniel Rashbaum, for sure, I know his face. Mr. Morris, I think that's him. If it's not him, oops. I think it's him, though. So these are the former attorneys that were representing Donna Adelson, and they are no longer representing her anymore. She's got a whole new team. I think she has 2 female attorneys that are representing her. And this time, they for sure double-checked to make sure there is no conflict of interest, because the judge, you know, he doesn't want to play games. The judge doesn't want to waste time. He wants to make sure there are no surprises this time. Oh, also I have a picture of the judge. Boom! Judge Everett. Judge Everett has a fine voice. I like Judge Everett. Proceedings, the court. This is a defense motion concerning the testimony of Robert Adelson. So Robert Adelson appeared on this podcast along with his wife, Horatha. Now we get to know a little more of a background history between him, the siblings, his relationship with his mother, father, before, right now, after Dan Marquette was murdered. And I think it's very interesting to listen to him talk about his family in the podcast, because we haven't heard him spoke anywhere else. Not that I know of, unless you guys know. Send it over to me if you know.
But Wendy has another brother.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest, and then my brother behind me, and then I'm 6 years older than Wendy.
Rob Adelson. Rob's in his mid-40s. He's a physician.
Hi, okay, so this is the next day. I have to re-record this part because the music that was used is copyright. So I have to re-record it, but essentially it recaps Robert Adelson's experience with his family members, especially, I think specifically Donna mostly, and Harvey as well, how he met someone who he was really in love with. However, she was not accepted by Donna or Harvey because she wasn't Jewish. The parents gave him an ultimatum where he had to choose between the woman that he loved and his parents, which is really tough. And so because of that, the relationship was like kind of tumultuous. You know, there was a lot of back and forth, breaking up, getting back together. And at some point, Robert did end up acquiescing to his parents, and he married a good Jewish girl. However, a couple days afterwards, he realized he wasn't in love with her, and he annulled the marriage. So that was the part that was covered in the podcast, and I think that's about it. So in case you guys are wondering what happened, the music was just copyrighted. So hello. If you all could make your appearances again: Ms. Kappelman, Georgia Kappelman for the state; Ms. Dugan, Sarah Catherine Dugan for the state; Mr. Rashbaum, Dan Rashbaum on behalf of Ms. Adelson, who is present; Mr. Morris, Alex Morris on behalf of Ms. Adelson. The court. All right, you can make your argument. Defense, Mr. Rashbaum. Judge, I think it pretty much speaks for itself. The papers. We filed them first in response to Ms. Dugan's concerns. I think we've alleviated those issues. We don't plan on eliciting that testimony unless something very unforeseen happens at trial. I can't imagine. The court. Why someone would need to use slurs? Mr. Rashbaum. I can't imagine the situation when that would come up. But if I'm not imagining something and it comes up, then we won't do it before alerting you first and the state's sidebar. But I tried to envision situations where it would come up, and I couldn't envision a situation. So I don't anticipate it being an issue, so we've indicated that in the motion. And that's, I think, footnote 1, where we indicated our position on that issue. So I don't know what the slurs thing is about. I tried to look up that defense motion. I believe it's sealed. That's why we can't look at it. I tried to look at the state's motion as well. I can't see it. So I don't know what they're referencing when they're talking about the slurs, but we'll get more information about the slurs later on in the transcript. So Mr. Rashbaum, continuing. With regards to the rest of the motion, we thought it important to educate the court because the last thing that anyone in this room wants is a mistrial. And we think that with this particular witness, given his relationship to the defendant, if there's a misstep here, it would necessitate a mistrial. So what we did is summarize every statement that he's made, and we've isolated for you and the state into 3 categories. And we showed why his opinion testimony, as well as his character opinion testimony, is not admissible. And we took the third component, which is potential admissions. And they provided they're elicited in the right way, and they're limited as to the actual admissions. We don't have any issues with those statements coming in. So again, they're talking about Robert Adelson, who is the eldest of the Adelson family, the eldest of the Adelson siblings.
For Rob, his childhood in Florida was a happy one. The family was well off, and they were all pretty close. They liked to poke fun at one another.
They were at a tennis tournament or something,
That's Haritha, Rob's wife.
and he bought like some kind of snack or something, and they gave him too much money back in change. So Rob said, "Oh, you made a mistake," and he gave the money back. And all day, the whole family proceeded to berate him. But why would you do that? Why would you give that money back?
This kind of thing got Rob a nickname from the rest of his family. They'd call him Honest Abe.
My parents used to make fun of it as Honest Abe, and I don't have any better or higher reason for that other than you just have to do the right thing.
But, Rob says, doing the right thing wasn't Charlie's MO.
I don't think that Charlie necessarily has that same feeling. I think there's more of an ends
Charlie doesn't have a moral compass?
justify the
That's surprising.
means.
In fact, between his two siblings, Rob says he always felt closer to Wendy. As he and Charlie got older, the differences between the brothers only seemed to increase.
We didn't have a lot in common. We didn't really spend any extra time together as adults.
They would, call each other on their birthday, and then as technology evolved, they would text each other.
By 2016, Rob is living in a nice colonial-style house in Albany, New York. A middle-aged family man with Haritha and 2 kids.
Oh, so Paul says, I think the slurs may be a reference to name calling from the family about Dan Markel. Yeah, possibly. Okay, possibly. Because I was thinking, like, did he call his mother a slur? Or maybe he said that, like, oh, my mother called Dan Markel this. Okay, so that's possible as well. We showed why his opinion testimony, as well as his character opinion testimony, is not admissible. Now, Rob's opinions are just his opinions. They're not facts. Whether or not, if he's planning on testifying and saying that, like, oh, I think my mom did it, or I think my mom is capable of doing it, I think she's a bad person, I think she's someone who doesn't have a moral compass. At the end of the day, those are just his opinions. And so these opinions can be seen more as prejudicial. We don't want the jury to decide, based on emotions, feelings, or bias. We want the jury to decide on facts, which is why when the court, whether or not they're going to have admissible testimony, they're going to weigh whether it's more prejudicial or more probative. We want to make sure that anything that comes out of Rob's mouth, they're actual facts, not just like his opinions, his emotions that he has towards his mother. So we showed why his opinion testimony as well as character opinion testimony is not admissible. And we took a third component, which is potential admissions, and provided that they're elicited in the right way and they're limited as to the actual admissions, we don't have any issues with those statements coming in. But we painstakingly did this to try to avoid any issue at trial because I don't think anyone wants that. So possible admissions, I think it could be whether or not Donna may have admitted to her son, Robert, about certain things in regards to the Dan Markel murder. So maybe she was like, oh yeah, I didn't like Dan Markel. And like, if I had a chance, I would probably off him if I could. That way Wendy can live with us. Or maybe she made some statements that made her sound really fucking guilty to her son. The court, Ms. Kappelman, Ms. Dugan, let's start with the first category of just pure opinion. I assume the state is not planning to elicit this in any way. Ms. Dugan, no sir. He did provide a lot of opinion in his deposition. Oh God, I would love to get my hands on his deposition transcript. That would be great. But he also asked his opinion. He was also asked his opinion and were asked why this, why that, why did he bring that to law enforcement's attention or whatever. I won't be asking him any of that on the stand. I won't be asking him his opinion on anything. The court. I think it's fairly clear as a matter of the law, no witness gets to come in and just wildly say, I think the defendant's a murderer. Already getting a preview of the deposition of what he said. Ms. Dugan, no sir. I only plan on asking him his observations, things he had personal knowledge of, and the defendant's admissions to him. So I'm wondering, at any possible time, is it possible that Donna Adelson might have admitted to being involved in Dan Markel's murder? The court, very well. As to the character-based opinion concerning the relationship between him and his own mother, are you planning to get that in any way? This would be the second area the defense has raised the motion. The first, I believe, would be pure speculative opinion. The second deals with, which is more relationship-based. This is more relationship-based. Ms. Dugan, I was going to ask him. They did ask in the depo, and she is Donna Adelson pretty sharp, or is she someone who is, I don't remember the exact word that he used, but I think they were trying to say gullible. And he said, no, she's very sharp. She's not someone who is gullible or could pull the wool over their eyes easily. or something like that. I may ask something like that, which is something he would have personal knowledge of from knowing her, but I don't plan to ask anything about prior bad acts of her helping conceal a crime, or gets cut off by Donna Adelson's attorney, Mr. Morris. His answer was actually a lot more inflammatory to that opinion, to that question. It was that there's no person who places their own interests first or something like that than Donna Adelson, which, we could totally see that. Dan Markel was getting in her way. Dan Markel was the reason why Wendy, her daughter, and her 2 grandchildren were not living in the Miami region, because Dan Markel lived in Tallahassee. It was like 6 hours away, and he didn't want to be away from his sons. So he was essentially the person that stood in Donna Adelson's way. Ms. Dugan, well, I would be letting him know that we're not going to, get in any, it's just, is she pretty sharp or is she gullible? Mr. Rashbaum, I don't think it's admissible, period, because he is a doctor. He's not a licensed psychologist. He's not, the court. Well, I'll put it this way, Mr. Rashbaum, as part of the state's case in chief, you may be correct. Depending on what comes out during the defense case as a matter of rebuttal, if any of the arguments are ignorance at that point, it's fair game. So they're essentially saying that, typically you can't just go on there and talk about, just talk shit about a person's character, right? Or their past behaviors and things like that. However, if Donna Adelson says I was ignorant during the entire time, I didn't know what was happening, Charlie did this without me knowing, blah, 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 then it's possible that the statement that the son made about, Donna being sharp and not gullible could be admitted. You could use it as basically a rebuttal. Mr. Rashbaum, agreed. Agree with you completely. Ms. Dugan. But at times, wouldn't his 18 or 20 years of living with her provide him the personal knowledge to know whether she's someone who's gullible or not? The court says the context of how you want to use it, I think, really comes at issue with that. Obviously, the mother-son relationship, him knowing her, having an intimate relationship with her, that is going to satisfy a certain foundational basis. Without knowing, and I obviously cannot compel the defense to show their hand, nor am I trying to, which aspect is either the element or the elements or the state's theory is going to cover as a part of case in chief? Maybe that's a better way for me to ask this. Ms. Dugan, to prove knowledge of the crime they're going to be alleging, the court, or as to conspiracies you're saying? Ms. Dugan, correct, the court. Response as to that particular aspect, Mr. Rashbaum. But he has no knowledge as to the crime. He says that. So the fact, the court. No. Concerning your clients. So Donna Adelson, Mr. Rashbaum. So him pontificating, I think my mom is a very smart woman, is not relevant towards whether she did a murder or not. I mean, again, let's be clear, and let's not hide the ball here. It's obviously why they're calling this individual. They're calling him because they want the jury to know without him saying it, because they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to get it from him because it's opinion testimony that he believes his mother is guilty, that his mom is guilty. That's essentially what they're calling him for. Yeah, obviously. It's okay, let's have Robert go up there and testify. And it's going to be pretty obvious to the jury that he doesn't have a good relationship with his mother or doesn't have good opinions about her. And so Rashbaum is saying that, his testimony could potentially be very prejudicial to my client. Although he's not saying it overtly, saying oh, my mom is a murderer, but it's possible that the jury could make that possible connection just by how he's talking about her. And obviously, not saying nice things about her, right? That's essentially what they're calling him for. They're calling him to show that there is a negative relationship between this person and his mom, which is highly prejudicial to us and not probative of anything. And so what we're asking the court to do is to limit the testimony to what she said to him, his beliefs in how she is, what she is, how she acts, whether she's smart, whether she's stupid, whether she's gullible. It's precisely what is not allowed because it is highly prejudicial to the jury. It is not evidence of anything. It is not relevant. And when you do sort of any balancing tests, I love those words, balancing tests, it just doesn't survive. And so, they're calling him as a show to the jury. That's why they're calling him. And so I understand, look, the things she said to him are admissible. I want to know what she said to him. Oh God, I want to know so bad. There are things that she said and they're admissions of a party opponent, but this court should protect the defendant's right to this jury being prejudiced by them being able to show through inadmissible evidence that this son has an axe to grind against his mom. I wonder what the defense is going to try to say, the reason why Robert doesn't get along with his mother. So the interesting thing is if Donna Adelson made admissions to her son, Robert, that she did it or she was involved in it or whatever it is, those things are considered admissible to the court. So if Donna was like, oh, hey, you know, like I did this, I was involved, then Robert, because he heard that from his mom's mouth directly, can't testify to that, right? These are her admissions of a party opponent. However, if Donna wants to testify and say, well, actually, I also said this, I also said that to him, she wouldn't be able to, because then that would just be hearsay, which is like really interesting about like court stuff, you know, and how I guess like if you commit a crime, be careful what you say. Be careful what comes out of your mouth. Be careful who you tell it to. Or just don't say anything at all. Or don't commit the crime. And that's easier said than done, right? So again, anything that Donna has admitted to her son, that's an admission of a party opponent, that will be allowed in the testimony. But if Donna Adelson was like, oh, you know, I said this, that I didn't do it, and that I didn't do that, Donna wouldn't be able to testify to that. The court, all right, as to 16. And I believe this came up in the last trial, whether Ms. Adelson is an overly involved parent. This one strays a line, somewhat, at least in my eyes, between fact and opinion. Robert Adelson, if he has a foundational basis to establish, knows that his mom was either involved in the life of his other two siblings or himself. To that point, he can testify factually if he asks questions. Mr. Rashbaum, I think that's correct, Your Honor. In the podcast, Rob discloses just how domineering his parents are, both Harvey and probably mostly Donna Adelson, but, you know, he talks about Harvey as well. And so this becomes a huge issue when he's dating someone who is non-Jewish. Essentially, he was forced to break up with his girlfriend, and he married someone who was Jewish, that was approved by his parents. However, a couple days after marrying, he decides to annul the marriage because he realizes, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not in love with this person. I'm in love with Haritha. And he goes back to being with Haritha. And at this point, Donna, Harvey, I guess they accept. I don't know. I don't know if they like truly genuinely accepted or if they just had to pretend because they knew if they didn't pretend, they were going to lose their eldest son.
It was that simple. Haritha was not Jewish.
Huh, okay. And was that explicit?
Yes.
Rob was stuck between the woman he loved and his family. And so began a painful series of breakups and reconciliations.
He was very close with his parents at the time. So we proceeded to break up and get back together and break up and get back together over the course of another year and a half.
For someone like me who, you know, was extremely, probably overly close to my parents, pleasing them, you know, mattered a lot.
All of this was happening at the worst possible time for Rob. He was in his residency, which is a notoriously draining, stressful process. Finally, his parents wore him down. He broke up with Haritha.
So Rob is a physician. I think he is still a physician to this very day. I mean, why would you want to waste all that money in medical school and then pivot careers, right?
And, well, he doesn't like to talk about what happened next.
Had my parents not put up multiple years of threatening to disown me, multiple years of angry, difficult phone calls, it never would have occurred.
He actually got engaged to someone else, a nice Jewish girl from Dallas.
Jesus.
His parents were much happier with that relationship, but it didn't last.
I was very briefly married to someone else. I feel terrible for all the pain it caused anyone involved.
Days into the marriage, Rob decided he'd made a huge mistake.
There was a rapid, I believe, annulment.
Haritha took him back, and they got married. And Donna and Harvey, well, they were at the wedding.
They came around and told Rob, you know, we've decided that it would be okay for you to be with her.
And I showed this before, but Dan Markel's blog is still up, and the blog where he attended this wedding is still up there. As you can see, this is like his blog. There are pictures of, I don't know if you guys can see this, Rob right there. That looks like Harvey to me. It's actually crazy that they eventually just, I don't know. I would assume like with Donna, it seems like she's the type of person who's like really stubborn that she would just be like, okay, well, I'm not attending the wedding. But it seems like Donna really tried to get with the program. Like the outfit that she's wearing and everything. There's Charlie, Donna, Harvey. Wendy with Dan Markel. So it seems like, Donna was, maybe she finally gave up after years and years of hounding her eldest son. This past weekend, as I mentioned in my Winning Life's Lottery post, I was at the wedding of Wendy's brother, Dr. Robert Adelson, marrying Dr. Haritha Chalipali in Chicago. And all through the weekend, I kept chanting my Bellow-inspired fantasy mantra, I am American, Chicago born. The wedding was held at the Palmer House Hilton, which, notwithstanding rooms a bit on the small side, is an extraordinary public building. Its lobby has a Beaux Art ceiling renovated by the same fellow who helped restore the Sistine Chapel. Yeah, I was like, I kind of get Sistine Chapel vibes. The Empire Room in which the wedding was held is a Rococo extravaganza, very fitting for the affair. The wedding also has some interesting experiment in American ecumenicism. The bride comes from a Hindu family, and the Wendy's brother is Jewish and Ashkenazi at that. And comes no surprise, the picture of the melded union of social unions are revealing. For the Hindu ceremony, Wendy and her mom, along with her brothers, sported traditional Indian garb, looking stunning. After the Hindu ceremony, which to my naked eyes shared some interesting parallels with Jewish services, there was an Indian cocktail hour, followed by the costume changes by the family, and then a Jewish ceremony under the chuppah, with dinner and dancing afterwards. Because the Jewish service was second, the dinner featured the unusual sight of scores of Indian men walking in yarmulkes, and moments later, dancing with alacrity, albeit haltingly, to Hava Nagila. I don't know, I probably butchered that. Wendy unfortunately took a sharp elbow to her arm during a whirling melee. Thankfully, there were hundreds, at least 100 doctors in the room. ... Yeah, it's like hauntingly crazy to be reading his blogs, because he's not here anymore.
And they really tried. We all tried for a fresh start.
But making that fresh start wasn't easy. Rob says breaking up with Haritha and marrying someone else, even briefly, because of his parents, is the worst thing he's ever done.
I do think my parents did everything they could do to try to make things better. There's a good bit of scar tissue to wade through from that. I don't think it resolved, but I think it made it better.
But before, you counted yourself as really close with your parents.
Yes.
And after, would you still say the same thing?
Less so.
Still, Rob and Haritha kept coming to family events. And they stayed in touch with both Dan and Wendy.
Poor Haritha. I wonder if when she came around the family events, I wonder how they treated her. Like, did they ignore her? Did they act like she didn't exist? Or was it like, on the surface, like niceties? Were they cold towards her? Like, I don't know, man. I feel like, hopefully they were genuine and authentic in their acceptance of her. But it must have been really fucking awkward to go to those family events. I would have fucking hated it.
Even through their divorce. Then they heard the news about Dan's murder, and their stomachs turned.
Here's a question for you. Did you think you knew what happened?
Yes, and I was also hoping that it would not be a worst case scenario.
The court. All right. As to whether she is gullible or intelligent, Ms. Dugan, if there is a basis in which you want to proffer this line of questioning, I'll reserve ruling until then. But as rebuttal, I will find the state, if any of the defense deals with ignorance or the lack of knowledge in some facet, at that point, it is fair game for rebuttal. So again, they're not going to really focus, the state is not going to mention, Donna Adelson being a sharp person, not being gullible, unless the defense is trying to say that like, oh, like she was ignorant of what happened, she didn't know what happened, or I don't know, in some other way, right? Then at that point, again, like I mentioned earlier, the state can use that as a rebuttal, saying they're like, well, actually, he knows Miss Adelson pretty well, and Miss Adelson or Mrs. Adelson is actually quite a sharp person. There's no way anyone could really trick her. All right, Miss Dugan, not all of them, but several of them. The court, very well. As to those admissions, really the how and why, and the how and when they took place, I should say those would be the foundational parts. But as long as they can be satisfied, they are party opponent admissions. Any other particulars we need to address as the motion in particular? Ms. Dugan, just as to the alleged derogatory term, I do appreciate defense's discretion in their motion on that filing it under seal. So we can't look at it. My motion in limine, which I tried looking up, I don't think I can look at it as well, that I brought up last week was to not only then asking Robert or asking the witness about it, Robert Adelson, but also asking any other Adelson family member, whether it be the defendant or any other Adelson family member testifying about it. So that will be my motion in limine as to eliciting from anyone. I don't know, like the way this is phrased, for some reason, it sounds like the slur came out of Robert Adelson's mouth. But I don't know if it came out of his mouth when he was describing how maybe his family was using it to call other people, but I don't know. I appreciate the defense's discretion in their motion on that filing under seal. I don't know. I feel like this would be something that could be detrimental to Robert Adelson. That's why I assumed that maybe he was the one that said it. Maybe not referencing that it was his mom that said it. I don't know. We'll see. Mr. Rashbaum, yeah, and I didn't realize that, but it's still the same answer stays, which is we will not ask of anyone unless something comes up, and then we will come to the court before that. The court, because of the highly inflammatory nature of putting a racial slur before the jury, similar to you, I can't imagine a context in which this would occur. We will need to handle it at sidebar out of the presence of the jury if it comes up in any way. As for the ruling that was made yesterday on dismissing the indictment, I believe the state indicated that you would have another motion concerning that issue depending on the court's ruling. I think this is all that's relevant to the topic right now. They're going to talk about some other stuff. Yeah, some other stuff that they were going to rule on. All right. So going back to the podcast, again, if you guys haven't heard the podcast yet, in your free time, definitely check it out. We listened to parts of it before, and I think I reacted to like maybe one episode. But I basically went to the podcast and I tried to find parts where Robert was mentioned, because Robert didn't testify at the trial at all for, I don't think, any of the trials. He wasn't there for Charlie Adelson's trial as well. I don't think he was called or anything. But it seems like he was a potential witness for the Donna Adelson trial, the trial that was supposed to happen in September. And since that didn't happen, maybe he will testify against his mother in the June trial, possibly. By the way, I think the people who made this podcast, I don't think they knew Dan Markel directly, but they knew the people that were friends with Dan Markel. That's why they were able to get like a good amount of information, and they were able to maybe possibly have, I don't know, maybe the Adelson family or some of them to be willing to speak to them.
Good. I just got done with a little Nova. And it's so good. Sunny side up eggs with some sliced Nova.
They chat about his nephews.
But you know what, Grandma? I think I'll have some lox. I really like lox.
And his siblings, Wendy and Rob.
Wendy's like 7 years behind Robert. So Robert was leaving for college when Wendy was 10 years old. So she was 12 years old when he was going off to college. So, I mean, he had little to no, like, any real interaction with her before he left the house.
I can tell you how Wendy was when he left for college. Cried her eyes out for days. For days.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Horrible. She was a mess when he left for college.
Charlie, on the other hand, hasn't settled down and hasn't left South Florida. He likes going out in Miami with a tight-knit group of buddies and has a series of girlfriends. He's also successful in his own right. He's a respected periodontist, extractions, implants, bone therapy, and he makes a good living at it. A really good living. He owns multiple properties in Miami and drives a Ferrari.
His nickname is the Maestro. He had a license.
Himself.
Yeah, he gave himself the nickname the Maestro. His friends refer to him as the Maestro. He has a license plate that says Maestro. I think it says a lot when you unironically name yourself the Maestro.
Yeah, he's got a vanity license plate that says Maestro. He's also got a concealed carry permit. He keeps a gun under the seat of his car. Charlie works out religiously. His girlfriends post photos of him shirtless on Instagram. And he knows a lot about different steroid and weight regimens, which kinds you cycle, and which you can stay on for years. When friends call the Maestro on the phone, he dispenses advice about steroids and guns, and teeth.
Yeah, his tooth may be coming in is what's causing the pain.
And his sister's love life.
She's not 25, Wendy.
No, she's not.
She's 37 with 2 kids. If you want to set me up with a Victoria's Secret model that's 37 with 2 kids, you already know what I'll tell you.
I know.
I don't know. The way that he talks about Wendy sometimes just sounds so like, ugh. I don't know. It just like sounds so cringe. 'Cause I don't think that's the first time he's referenced sister Wendy being like hot or like Victoria's Secret model. I could have sworn he did before.
But that story before.
Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
And finances.
It's not going to be more than $15,000 to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I know.
And then we're at $6,000 a month, and that's it.
Charlie's ready to dispense advice on a whole host of subjects. Rob says the family joke was, Charlie's never wrong because Charlie's always right.
Like, he will talk to you until the point you would just agree with him to make the conversation end. But the phrase, Charlie's never wrong because Charlie's always right, was kind of a family mantra.
And on April 19th, his mom calls to ask him about something very unusual.
Okay, so that's where they were given the papers, and that's where the bump happened. Next episode, episode 6. Let's see, timestamp 5:05.
The last time Rob Adelson saw his entire family together was in early July of 2014. Harvey, his dad, was turning 70, and the Adelsons threw a big party at their new Miami Beach condo. Rob and Haritha flew down with their 2 children. Wendy was there with her boys. Charlie was there too, of course. The crowd milled through the apartment and out onto the patio, which faced the golden sand of South Point Beach. A chef, who Wendy hired, served paella to guests. Harvey had grown up as a working-class kid in Brooklyn. Now he was living in a luxury complex in Miami filled with celebrities and other multimillionaires. He had his 3 children, a doctor, a dentist, and a lawyer, and his 4 grandchildren, all together. What more could a Jewish parent want? It was just a few weeks later that Rob and Haritha got the phone call that Dan had been shot.
Donna called me on Saturday morning. I think she had already tried Rob and couldn't get through.
Yeah, she had texted me a couple. I was at a meeting out of town. I was in Chicago. And when they spoke to me, they told me they'd already talked to Haritha. They texted me a couple times, and then they texted me they need to talk to me right now.
Rob excused himself from his meeting and stepped outside.
And I remember exactly where I was standing in the lobby, and they explained that something has happened. Somebody shot Danny, and they took him to the hospital, but he didn't make it.
He tried calling Wendy.
I called her multiple times. I called my parents multiple times.
I wonder if it was unable to talk to Wendy because Wendy was too busy in the interrogation at that moment. How long was her interrogation again? Like, she was there for was it like 5 or 6 hours or something? I know the total footage that we saw was like maybe, was it 3 hours, 4 hours? But then there was a lot of like fast forwarding in between. I she was there for like a long time.
Finally, she actually called me at a strange time during the day when I happened to be free, and I picked up the phone, and she said she didn't want to talk about anything because her kids were around.
She seemed surprised he was available.
Yeah, she said she really just wanted to leave a message. And I said, well, you called me. And, I asked her point blank, what do you think happened? And her response was, well, Danny had no shortage of enemies.
Mm-hmm. That's what she told the investigators, too. And she also mentioned, those enemies could have been my brother, could have been my family.
But that's the most we've talked about it. And that's one of 2 conversations we've had since Danny was killed.
Later, Rob would want to talk more with his family about what happened to Dan.
Yeah.
They just didn't want to talk about it.
They kept saying that it doesn't involve them, and that Wendy felt that I was only interested in who would have done this, which seems like a normal reaction when someone you know well is gunned down in their home. I think not being interested in a murder of someone you know well is unusual.
He never did get a straight answer from his family, which shocked him. And as affidavits appeared, suggesting members of his family may have ordered Dan's murder, Rob stopped speaking with them altogether. Tallahassee police believed they had enough evidence to arrest 4 people.
That's so strange. Like, imagine trying to figure out, okay, who could have done it? Who would have done this? And then your family members, like Wendy, the ex-wife, and then you have Donna, and then you have Harvey. They're like, what do you mean? We don't want to talk about it. Why do you want to know who did this? Like, I don't know. It's like so weird. Oh, man. That's why a lot of people, they think Wendy's involved. Hi, Christine. How are you doing today? How's it going? Hello. We're listening to Robert Adelson right now, the eldest of the Adelson siblings, who possibly thinks his mother did it. Hi, Jeff. How's it going? We're on episode 6 right now. I think there's another mention in, let's see, 20. Maybe over here, 2005.
Wait, and it's, as a prosecutor, it's a long time to wait for, resolution of a case, but certainly the family has, been through hell waiting for this case to get resolved in a fashion that's satisfactory to them, which is only that everyone that had a role in it is going to be held accountable. So the fear of that not being realized is, devastating to Dan Markel's family.
Rob Adelson says he wants the same thing.
And this is the same thing I've said from the very first moment this occurred, is I would like whoever was involved with killing Dan Markel to have the appropriate punishment, whoever it is.
Do you think that'll ever happen?
I think it's probably unlikely for that to happen.
5 years after the murder of her ex-husband, Wendy Adelson lives in Miami with her 2 sons. She's still very close to her family. And although law enforcement have never accused her of having anything to do with the murder, she has endured quite a bit of scrutiny. We spoke with her on New Year's Eve day of 2018. She stepped away from watching her boys to take the call. She told us that she appreciated us reaching out, but with the legal stuff happening and the way the media had treated her in the past, she was skeptical that talking to us would help. I think nobody wants to hear my story, she told us. I don't think people like me.
But why do you think people don't like you? It's not just like, oh, I don't like her, she's guilty. It's like, oh, she was saying some things that were very, very interesting. Things that were contradicting, things that just didn't make sense. The route that she took to get the liquor, and where she accidentally stumbled upon Dan Markel's house, Oh, gosh, there's just so many things just like, come on. Who are you fooling? Like I said, I don't think they have enough evidence against her, though, but I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe the state has something up their sleeves.
Says she has nothing to hide. She's done nothing wrong. And when she has spoken publicly, like when she went on that writing class podcast, people used her words against her. The truth is, I remember less and less as the days go on, she told us. I don't have any bad feelings about people who remember that our divorce was contentious, but it's like ancient history to me. When we suggested, in passing, that she'd turned over a new leaf, she wanted to make clear that was not accurate. Our lives are very much impacted on a daily basis by what happened, she said. She's focused on trying to raise her boys to be happy and joyful kids who have a deep understanding of who their father was. Her kids are the victims, and she's a bystander. It's been years since Rob Adelson has spoken with his little sister.
I would certainly wish things were a different way. I would certainly wish I had some, siblings, share a common story and a common background. I do miss her. There's certain things I see that, I knew she would think is funny, and that's just not available to me.
Do you ever think about picking up the phone when you see something funny and texting her?
No.
Maybe it's the benefit of hindsight, but looking back, Rob and Haritha say there were warning signs right from the start.
Yeah, so interesting that Rob, it seems like to him, he doesn't think it's just Charlie and Donna that's involved. He thinks that Wendy has some involvement as well.
Even at the wedding.
It felt strange. It was more of like
there was a lot of tension.
Yeah.
It was palpable. You could feel the tension between the two because there had been other events leading up to this. There was some discord already.
The wedding that others said was so beautiful.
It was like an 80s bar mitzvah with, lights and, no fireworks, but that's probably because it was inside, lasers. That's what it felt like a more like a bar mitzvah.
And they remember the kosher mix-up really well.
He had a rabbi friend who was there, he was close to from Harvard, and apparently at some point there was a platter of food where the meat was with the cheese and he lost it. And he said, "Meat and cheese, Danny," and he stormed out.
So if I remember correctly, apparently there was drama at the wedding because, Dan is he takes his religious very seriously, the practice very seriously. And I think, was it Donna who was in charge of catering or something like that? Maybe. And Donna just didn't respect Dan, obviously. And so maybe she threw in a little bit of drama during the wedding by making sure that there was food that was served that wasn't kosher, and then maybe not following the practice strictly.
And did he say something like, "You should never marry"? I told you should never be marrying her. If only they had listened.
But for them, the wedding also gave an indication of just how controlling Wendy's parents could be.
This wedding was like it was Donna's wedding. Wendy was in law school, and she really didn't care. She apparently...
Are there pictures from the wedding? It'd be interesting to see what Donna wore at the wedding. I wonder if Donna also wore, like, you know... You guys ever seen that movie, Monster-in-Law, where Jennifer Lopez is, like, marrying... Is it Matthew McConaughey? Maybe Matthew McConaughey. However... His mother is like a fucking monster. And for the wedding, I think she tried to wear white. She tried to upstage the bride by wearing this like white, like lavish gown or some shit like that. Oh, it's one of my favorite movies.
We had once said that she just wanted to get married on the beach. She had told Rob that. Instead, she was married in a very elaborate Orthodox wedding with, I think, maybe 8 or 9 bridesmaids.
Holy shit.
And so this was the opposite of that. But all the details were really... made by Donna.
And that, Haritha says, carried on right through the divorce.
They were very involved in the marriage, and they were definitely involved in the divorce. It was really felt like it was their divorce.
Donna and Harvey occasionally send birthday cards to Rob and Haritha's children, but it's been years since they've seen them in person.
You know, I don't think they're that interested in my kids, unfortunately, because they're fantastic.
Donna and Harvey do see Wendy's kids all the time, which is what they wanted all along. For the other grandparents, Ruth and Phil Markell, the last few...
And I wonder if they're not interested in Rob's kids because, you know, they're like mixed kids, right? And I don't know if they practice like a mix of Jewish and like Hinduism. I'm not too sure. Or if they're just like, if they only practice Hindu and then maybe Donna has like no interest whatsoever.
Years have been one nightmare after another. Phil still wakes up often in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah, this part's really sad. So this is like Dan Markell's parents. Oh my God, it's so sad. But I want to continue listening to it.
Thinking about his son.
Either I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about taking Danny skiing or something, or I'm on the golf course and you meet strangers. You're golfing with 2 strangers. And what's the most natural thing you talk about? You marry, you have children, you have grandchildren. What do you say? How much do you say? Who do you tell?
Yeah, that's so sad. It's like, yeah, I had a child, but he got murdered. Yeah, I have 2 grandchildren, but I haven't seen them because the ex-wife's family, they're fucking psychos, and I haven't been able to see them. I think they were eventually able to see them at some point, but yeah, I don't think they have a close relationship with the grandchildren at all. Like, super sad.
There isn't a day that goes by in my life that this issue doesn't come up in one way or another. I mean, it's the worst thing in life, I think, is to lose a child at any age. And then to lose 2 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Because Ruth and Phil haven't seen Dan's kids, their grandchildren, since around the time Katie Magbanua was arrested. That arrest changed something. And although Phil and Ruth had tried to work with Wendy to see the boys...
And I think Catherine Magbanua was arrested in 2016. So maybe like 2 years after the murder happened. I think 2016 was when Catherine Magbanua and like the hitmen were arrested.
Really tried.
She suddenly stopped making that opportunity available. And we continued to send presents and we continued to do other things. We even had our lawyer contact her lawyer and try to see if there was opportunities to designate a meeting, and there wasn't. So that was really the beginning of the cutting off process.
Yeah, so sad. Oh, all right. Well, again, guys, I think there's only like, how many episodes are there? They're like 30-minute episodes. They're pretty short, 7 episodes long. So definitely check out this podcast if you guys haven't already. We definitely took a look into this podcast. I think maybe like last year when we were covering... Oh, what were we covering last year? I forgot what prompted this, but I think we wanted to get more information about the family background, about the eldest Adelson sibling, and to know what happened, know the reason why he cut off the family, and maybe some of the background drama that happened, and learn more about Donna Adelson, Charlie Adelson, and even Wendy Adelson as well. So as I mentioned before, we do have a trial date that is finally set, and we have some other dates that are set for this case as well. Case management hearing. So we'll see you guys on Tuesday, February 11 at 2:30 p.m. Again, this is East Coast time zone. They'll have a case management hearing. Discovery deadline for them is Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. Unless exceptional circumstances exist, the court expects all discovery, including depots, retention of experts, disclosure of witnesses or materials in compliance with the Florida Rule of Criminal Procedure, will be complete by both parties on or before Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. Man, it'd be very interesting to get the deposition transcripts from Haritha and Rob Adelson. Also, pretrial motion filing deadline is also Wednesday, April 30th. All pretrial motions must be filed on and before this date. Pending motions in limine will be set for hearing promptly, but at the latest in May 2025. Witness list, exhibit list, and demonstrative exhibits. The state and defense must provide the final witness list, final exhibit list, and the final list of demonstrative exhibits to opposing counsel on or before Wednesday, April 30th. Pre-trial hearing on Friday, May 16, 2025. Damn, we're already in 2025. It's crazy. Are you guys still writing 2024 on your dates, or are you guys used to 2025 now? So pre-trial hearing on May 16th. And then finally, jury selection and trial. Tuesday, June 3rd. Hopefully, no issues, no delays, no conflicts of interest at 30 a.m. The court anticipates a jury selection will conclude on or before Friday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for jury selection. And then maybe, hopefully, testimony will begin on or before Monday, June 9, 2025. I forgot how long they initially were planning the trial to be when it was scheduled in September. Was it also going to be like a short trial? Because Charlie Adelson's trial was pretty short. I felt like it was only a week long or 10 days. It happened so quickly. It happened when I had COVID, and I remember I was like, oh shit, there's this trial that's happening. I remember this case was crazy, and I was just like super sick, and I didn't get to watch it until afterwards. So I'm assuming maybe this trial will also be pretty short. Maybe it'll be like a week or 10 days long, which, we like short trials, straight to the point. All right, so that's it pretty much for Donna Adelson at the moment. Again, we covered the unsealed hearing that occurred a couple days before her trial was set to happen. Her trial got delayed. She has a new set of attorneys. They'll have the next case management hearing on February 11, and then we'll have jury selection and trial in June. So 6 months away.